Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Leaders Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Today, we're discussing, does AI spell the end of the consulting business? Plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. And thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. You can get preferred pricing of up to 45% off at irpaai.com/NetSuite. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Chris Surdak. He's a senior analyst at IRPA AI, formerly White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner at Gartner, and practice lead at EY. He's written a bunch of books, and he's a glutton for punishment. He's writing another book, amongst other things. Chris, you sleep, man? I don't know. I don't feel like you could.
Sleep when I'm dead. Sleep is for the weak.
Overrated.
Yeah.
Although I was reading there's some cool AI sleep stuff. All the famous people and rich people are using this $5,000 mattress pad now to tell if they're sleeping well enough. I usually just have a cup of coffee, and I usually know about an hour in whether I slept well or not.
Yeah, makes me think of the scene from Idiocracy when he goes to the doctor and they have like the different probes, and one you put in your mouth and another in your butt and so forth, and they mix up which goes where. We're measuring everything. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
We're measuring everything. Data is around us, but I don't know if anybody told you, Chris. Apparently, we're in a bubble. The market's in a bubble. Apollo's chief economist came out this week and said the AI bubble is worse than the 1999 .com bubble. And guess what? They went over to Sam Altman. Verve interviewed Sam Altman yesterday, and was hoping to dispel that concern. And guess what? Sam Altman agreed with
them. Congratulations, Captain Obvious. Oh my gosh, we're in a bubble. Who knew? My greater concern is, and this is a cycle we always go through. My greater concern is the order of magnitude. Having been through the crash of 2000 and 2008 and so forth, it was painful. We weren't putting trillions of dollars into it. So if it's not a question of if, but when this bubble does pop, my concern more is the pain associated, and that the whole intent of this technology was to replace a whole lot of people. So a whole lot of people have already lost their jobs, and then the mechanism for them reintegrating back into businesses is going to be, I think, quite difficult. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I know this wasn't a surprise to you. You've been pretty strong-minded on this topic, but I'm surprised to hear someone in the space, like OpenAI's CEO, say the same. I mean, I guess maybe he's more grounded in reality than some people thought. Last week we were talking about his kind of seemingly crazy aspirations of general intelligence, AGI, and today, he's kind of, trying to reset expectations. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I'm dating myself here, but it reminds me of Baghdad Bob back when we were invading Iraq. And he's on the TV saying the Americans aren't here, and the tanks are rolling behind him on live television. So Sam's sort of having his Baghdad Bob moment where you can no longer pretend that this isn't happening. And I guess the more interesting thing is the degree of comfort with which he's changed his story in the span of 6 or 7 hours, but which is potentially telling and is a tell. Going again back to my spacecraft days where I was the engineer that had to design for failure, I'm very much in the mode of, okay, given that this is occurring now, how do we fix it? What is the fix for the coming pop of the bubble? And then what does it look like to kind of repair the damage that was done? So I think that's where my head's at.
I mean, there was another data point around this last week. It was more general, not necessarily related to tech, although the tech industry has, I think, in most people's minds, kind of kept the market, going over the last few months. But Gartner's CEO in an earnings report last week. And we're going to talk more about them, but he had the excuse on that earnings call of saying that overall CEO confidence in the U.S. has fallen to what he called recessionary levels, among the fastest drops ever recorded, and that 78% of CEOs that they surveyed reported cost-cutting measures. Escalating purchase decisions, tariff impacted industries in particular, but not a whole lot of confidence at the C level.
Yeah, the fraternity party is a lot of fun until the keg runs dry and you find out the living room's on fire, and that's kind of where we find ourselves to a certain extent. I think it's been a long time coming, and we were sort of kicking the can down the road to a certain extent, but eventually the music stops and you just have to acknowledge what's going on out there. So I'm not terribly surprised that people are coming to this conclusion. What's going to be interesting is what the response is over the course of, really, I think the rest of 2025. There's going to be a lot of everyone that went to the fraternity kegger is going to have a heck of a hangover, I think, for the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't realize as I was putting some of these things together today that it was so much doom and gloom. But the other piece here is MIT came out with this report, and a couple interesting stats came out of it. But one of them was that 95% of internal AI pilot programs are failing to boost revenue or productivity. Fortune magazine is saying that, upon further review, the issue is not necessarily the models, but flawed integration. I know you're going to say big surprise again, but 95% failure rate. Listen, digital transformation has a high failure rate. We all know this. We've been in the business, but to say in one breath, 95% failure rate, in the other breath, talking about the AI investment is up. Where I guess that maybe does go to the bubble thing, but you see some of these numbers, some of these valuations, some of these adoption levels, and then you see a number like that. Crazy.
Well, and having formerly worked at Gartner has always said, as Forrester and all the other major analyst vendors, that about a 95% failure rate is typical with almost every technology implementation. Certainly in my prior history, when I was at HP and we were trying to deploy autonomy for this kind of automation stuff, we were lucky to get 5% success rate. The entire RPA wave from 8 years ago, it's exactly what's in my third book, right? About 5% success rate. So this is normal, unfortunately. And then the question is, what does it take to be in the 5%? And usually it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of effort. And if it isn't painful, it's not transformational. And I coined the term a while ago, diet pilling. Everybody wants to lose weight. Nobody wants to stop eating pizza. And so a lot of these initiatives for automation is how do I make a bunch of money so I get my bonus at the end of the year, but I don't actually want to change anything. And so this is just that diet pilling mentality manifesting itself.
But the other problem is, if you're the head of transformation or innovation or one of these roles and you're watching, at least up until now, I would say, why would you do this? Like, if your job's on the line and there's a 95% chance that you're going to fail, like, what's your incentive to even do? We wonder why we're always seemingly going up a steep hill trying to convince people to do this stuff. But then you see stuff like this, and it's like, why would they? I mean, the only argument I can think of is now with AI, the impact is potential impact is so substantial that maybe it's worth that bet. But I mean, if you think about digital transformation over the last 10 years, like, why did you do it at all?
Well, Digital transformation is a great example. I've been told by people, oh, that's so 10 years ago, we already did it. Well, if you really did it, how come you didn't have any meaningful business impact? How come you didn't double company revenue or cut your staff in half or whatever? People will say that they did this transformation stuff, but the results that they get demonstrate that they didn't. And I think the other side of it is, only 5% succeeds, but everybody thinks that they're the ones that are going to be in the 5%. It's the why do people buy lottery tickets? You're all thinking how you're going to spend the $100 million when you win it, but that your chance of actually being the winner is astonishingly small. So it's a degree of kind of self-deception that we as humans are really, really good at, and right up until the reality kind of smacks us in the face. And I think we're in that smacking of the face phase is coming upon us with this AI stuff. And I hate to come off as doom and gloomer, but this is just the operational reality that I've witnessed in 35 years of doing this stuff.
Well, and the other two ways to look, the two kind of nuggets to pull out of this, though, is number one, they're talking about devil's in the details, right? They're talking about in-house AI pilots, right? So maybe there's something here to say, wait a second, there's a benefit. We'll get to our main story in a little bit, but a benefit to somebody who knows what they're doing, implementing this for me. So we'll get to the consulting part of the show in a couple minutes. But the other is that, where is this stuff being implemented? The MIT report goes into a little bit more detail and says that a good chunk of these pilots are in the sales and marketing areas, not in the outsourcing and back office areas, which you could argue is really where the savings may be, right?
I think it's very telling. I think it comes off like I'm totally against the technology. No, I think it's a phenomenal technology for the right use cases. And I think the challenge is many of the use cases that have been selected are actually some of the worst you can have. One of the examples I give is everybody's trying to use AI for customer service. And I think I told you 2 weeks ago, I was trying to Zelle someone some money, and my credit union, I wasn't sure if they'd use Zelle. I Google AI'd it, and they said, absolutely, your credit union does it. And here's all the specific steps that you can follow so that you can Zelle from your account. It was all a lie. None of it was true. And so everyone's looking, particularly, customer service and customer support is a great use case for AI. No, it's probably the worst one you could choose. And so as with all technology, can you brush your teeth with a chainsaw? It's possible. I wouldn't recommend it. And that's kind of how AI is. It's a tool, and you got to use it for the right purposes. And if you do that, you're going to succeed. If you use it for something it's not good at, you're probably going to have catastrophic problems.
So the other story we have to touch on is this whole meta crisis going on. I mean, when I finish, well, that's true too. But just when I finished defending AI privacy to one of our members, you see something like this come out. In case you've been living under a rock, it came out last week that Meta's AI rules have allowed bots to have sensual and often semantic chats with minors, offer false medical information. And I think maybe the nail in the proverbial coffin here is that there's supposedly evidence of several executives up to Zuckerberg, including the head of ethics at Facebook, signing off on a very explicit directive that they knew, talked about it, and agreed upon it. Obviously, there's Congress people going after them. I just saw before we went live the Attorney General, whatever the equivalent of the Attorney General of Brazil, is giving Meta 72 hours to take all this down. They're going to subpoena all of this documentation, and I don't know. Is this the nail in the coffin? I mean, for so long, people have said, Meta in particular, not just Meta, not just to beat up on Meta, but some of these companies just going too far. You seem to get the, what you think maybe is the last thread, and then they just kind of keep going and getting away with it. But I think something's got to change after this, Chris. No.
Well, hey, thank God for guardrails on AI, right? They'll save us. Yeah,
Well, it's one thing to have guardrails, another thing to say, no, don't install the guardrails. Here's the
yeah,
Autobahn
well,
to your example from last week. Here's the Autobahn. We know people are going to crash. In fact, we're going to help them crash, and we're not going to put guardrails up.
and just simplify the cleanup. Yeah, none of this surprises me, having been in and around the business since its inception. Meaning, by that I mean social media. But yeah, I mean, until you actually hold people accountable for this kind of stuff, if this is what makes people money, then they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to refine potentially the evil stuff that they do that earns them money. If you don't stop them, then it'll continue to optimize. And it has become so pervasive. I myself, I don't know if you saw this. It came out, I think, this morning. Where Otter AI, which is one of these systems that records your meetings and so forth and summarizes them, they're now being sued for infringement of privacy and so forth. I think globally at this point. So they're going to be, and I personally, with working with my teams, I put in Otter AI, and now it automatically jumps into every call that I'm in, and there's no way for me to shut it off. And I'm a technical guy, and I'm pretty good at looking. I cannot find the shut this off button. So now it's penetrated into every call that I'm on, except for this one apparently. So yeah,
That's
I mean,
interesting though. So they were one of the early adopters. I was an early adopter of that. We use something else now for a bunch of different reasons, but yeah, that did have a button that like allowed you to disable the auto join feature at one point. And it's interesting you mentioned them because I saw a commercial for Otter for the first time ever on TV. I think it was last night. And it was interesting the way they positioned it. They didn't position it as just a assistant for while you're on the call. They positioned it as something that could join your calls in your absence to keep you apprised to what was going on in the meeting. I thought that was a very interesting angle.
As a guy who went to law school and have worked in privacy for the better part of 20 years, it's absolutely horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. I got a transcript of some of my internal calls, and I'm like, it's spot on, and it's absolutely terrifying. Now, and I see the positive of it too, right? Oh, great! I have all these notes for my meetings and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it really supports sort of a degree of intellectual and organizational laziness, but it's an enormous exposure. Enormous exposure.
I love it. I love it. I get all the risks and all that stuff, and I'm talking purely as a consumer right now. But I use it. And, you know, we're a small business running a large association. So efficiencies, time savers is huge for me. And the tool we use, it actually, you know, does all the basic stuff. It records, it transcribes, but it also summarizes and it will actually draft follow-up emails. So it'll capture action items from the call and draft an email that, you know, you get to check it before you hit send. But I would say it's about 85% there. You know, I go in, I make some tweaks, and you know, if there's a next step, it'll actually this has a calendaring assistant built in too, so it'll chase the person down to book the next call. That's a huge productivity. And talk about like, you know, task automation versus process automation. This particular tool is really process automation. It's not just doing the calendar thing or just doing the notes. It's kind of doing the whole process of what you would do after a call and to the next call. But yeah, you know, every once in a while, I'll see one of these recordings where it didn't automatically turn off, and you know, it's recorded me yelling at my kids or something in the background. So yeah, I mean, I get it.
You know, I was on the team that helped to revise the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure in 2015 related to records retention. And the issue here is that if you have that recording and it's somewhere in your system, you are obligated to maintain it and obligated to produce it if it ever comes up for something related to a legal action. And so now Facebook, Meta, they probably have gajillions of recordings like this of them talking about AI ethics. And guess what? They're going to have to produce it now. And they may not be ready for the implications of those conversations being submitted into court, but kind of too late.
The other thing is back to the Meta thing. I just can't let go of it. You know, I deleted. I mean, I think I have a Facebook, but I deleted it from my phone. Right. I very rarely use Messenger. You know, but I do use WhatsApp, right? And WhatsApp was supposed to be this secure platform. And they've said it's separate. They've said it's siloed. They've said it's encrypted. That they're going to keep that secure messaging platform secure. But how can you believe it? I mean, how can you believe that now after seeing this, right?
Don't. I mean, well, I always go back to like Snapchat, where you post something and we delete it in 30 seconds, and then it's gone from
It's gone forever, Chris. Didn't you know that?
Yeah, because it takes them 30 seconds to reroute it to all the people that are paying for the data. They're not doing this for free. They have to make money somehow. So yeah, they delete it from their servers because they've already passed it on to all of the data mining companies that have paid for it. So you got to get into the details of these agreements and stuff that you sign up for, and if you spend any amount of time in there, I've had sessions where I go through these end user license agreements with a bunch of attorneys, and I have to perform CPR before the session's over. They can't believe they agreed to it. And like I've done this hundreds of times over the last decade, but it's a little bit of whistling past the graveyard to a certain extent until the time when there's a consequence, and then you're like, oh my gosh, how did we do this? Well, too late.
Yeah. So let's get to our main topic. What prompted this? A couple announcements out of McKinsey this week. A couple just looking at earnings reports from analysts, consulting firms. The punchline is, are the consultants next? As far as just businesses of yesteryear being completely, I would say, more than disrupted, turned upside down by AI, right? So, set it up for us, Chris. You spent time, you were at Gartner, you were at EY, others, you've been in the consulting business. Isn't the pitch that we have all of the research, we have all of the data, and we know all of the things, and so you should pay us a lot of money by the hour, regardless of whether we solve your problems or not? Is that not the model? Before we get into what's happening, give us the model for those that don't know or haven't worked in a consulting firm.
So, and I got into strategy consulting and stuff as soon as I graduated Wharton back in 1996. That was the thing that, Gen X, we were sold the boomer dream: go to college, then get your Ivy League degree, and then become a strategy consultant, and you're going to make a gajillion dollars. So I bought it all hook, line, and sinker. And to your point, a good, at least half of my career was spent in that consulting world. So the model is, I think it comes in two pieces. Because the consultancies were willing to pay more for conceptually better people, more intelligent people, more talented people, than their clients would pay, then you would rent those brains at a slightly higher fee, and you kind of saved money because you only brought the people in part-time or for very specific purposes. So it was really a fragmentation of the labor market, saying the consultancies are going to hire the smartest people from the best schools, et cetera, and then we'll rent them to you on a part-time basis. It's going to cost you a lot more per hour, but it's going to be cheaper for you in the end. That's sort of the labor arbitrage.
Kind of fractional model, right? Fractional labor.
Yeah, it was a fractional access to your Ivy Leaguers and your MITers and all that kind of supposedly smarter people that you couldn't afford to bring in yourself, or you were unwilling to pay what you had to get them. The other half of the model, and this is true whether it's the consultancies or the advisors, the Gartners, the Forresters of the world, is plausible deniability, right? If you're an exec, and I say this from having thousands of these sessions with thousands of CEOs and so forth, the plausible deniability thing is, if you were going to buy into generative AI, you didn't want to make the decision on your own. You needed someone to advise you to make that decision, so that if it blew up and you were in the 95% that failed, not the 5% that succeeded, you could blame McKinsey, or you could blame Gartner, or you can blame whomever your consultant.
Nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. That whole adage.
That's right? Exactly it. But we kind of joke about that, but that is legitimately the basis of that entire analyst and consultancy business. Right? You don't, if McKinsey said so and you screwed up, we're not going to hold you accountable. It was McKinsey's fault. You got the best advice you could buy, and McKinsey charged $5 million to tell New York City that collecting garbage would be a good idea. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And so the potential collapse of that business is the lost in trust of what they advise, and also the belief that AI kind of how much the PowerPoints per capita, right, generated by that industry. It's just it's starting to ring hollow. The value wasn't necessarily there, and I say that as someone who did it. I've made tens of thousands of slides of PowerPoint and tried to in earnest deliver value from that work. But I mean, let's face it, PowerPoints don't produce results. They might give you some guidance, but you actually at some point you have to sit down and actually build something. And that's a lot of the companies aren't particularly good at that.
So let me give out some numbers, and I actually mentioned some of these in our show last week, but for those that didn't see it, and you were talking about McKinsey. So McKinsey is really what kind of drew my eye to this, right? We all kind of saw the writing on the wall, especially those of us that are in the industry. But McKinsey comes out and basically starts referring to themselves as an AI first agency. They kind of shifted from AI assist to we're going to use AI to actually deliver. And they got rid of 5,000 consultants. They brought in 12,000 AI agents. These are not pilots. These are AI agents that are embedded into their tax, advisory, research, and delivery. They are Lily is the name of the AI. It's handling 500,000 plus prompts a month, saving, according to them, 50,000 consulting hours. And according to them, client satisfaction is up, delivery speed is faster. And here's the really interesting part, because then we got to talk about the paradigm shift, right? 25% of projects are becoming outcome based. So you're paying for results, not for time. I remember when I first got into the outsourcing business, I'm like this young guy asking a bunch of questions that you're not supposed to ask. I remember asking some of our friends and mentors and stuff, Chris, like, I don't get it. Like, you're paying a consultant by the hour to solve a problem, but if they solve that problem, they're not going to be hired by you anymore. So what's their incentive to solve the problem? I realize it's more nuanced than that. I'm going to get a lot of hate mail. I get it. But this is interesting, right? Because now you can say, wait a second, it's not by the hour, it's by the outcome.
I'm not going to name names of which firm I was with that did this, because I believe that they all do it. But for one of the firms I was with, my personal performance bonus was not based upon delivery of contracts that we had in place. And I was a delivery guy. My compensation was based upon the value of the change orders I could issue in a given year. And so the whole intent, if you walked in and you said fixed price, whatever, $5 million project, if I delivered that project for $5 million, I would get zero bonus. But if I hit the customer with $2 or $3 million worth of change order, then I would max out my bonus for that year. So there's sort of malevolent behavior is rewarded. But the other thing I point to, we're wiping out our workforce and replacing with AI. This is the exact same conversation we had with RPA back in 2017. I don't know if you recall, but in 2017, Price Waterhouse made this huge announcement that they gave every single one of their professionals, like 60,000 people or whatever, gave every single one of them their own personal RPA bot that they could automate. And they were going to become the most competitive company in the world. And it was going to completely transform consulting. 2 years later, they shut it down. It distracted a bunch of people and produced almost no value whatsoever. So this is not new. Is AI going to be more effective than RPA was? Yeah, potentially. I personally might use AI to amplify, to help me do some work, and it's an amplifier. So if you have someone that's very good at what they do, it can make that person much better. If you have someone that's just average, it's not going to have any impact. And if you have someone below average on a given topic, it's going to make them far worse. So highly use case dependent. Is it going to be transformative of the business? We'll see. I mean, they're laying off a whole bunch of people. In 2 years, we'll see what percentage of them get hired back. And I think it may be a fairly substantial percentage if the business is still there.
Part the business is still there. Part of me though applauds them, right? McKinsey, that is, because at least they're trying to avoid their blockbuster moment, right? I mean, and the Wall Street Journal interviewed one of their senior partners responsible for AI, and she told them the question was, "Do you think this is an existential threat to your profession?" She said, "Yes, they know it is, but they
It's a
have to do something about it, right? They have to use it to pivot."
It's a remarkable level of self-awareness for an industry that is previously incapable of any self-awareness, I think. And Gartner's kind of saying the same thing. So kudos to them for that. But then how do you shift your business model, and how do you make this work in light of this reality is the challenging part. The other thing, and you and I've discussed this previously, the other challenge is, as with all professional services profession, you have this talent pyramid, right? We would always joke that Anderson Consulting would pull up the school bus with all the kids that just came out of college, and they would learn on the client's dime. And what most of these organizations are doing is they're using AI to wipe out those lower levels of people that are kind of climbing the talent ladder in their organization. And that's great for the partner level people, right? Because they improve their cost structure, they make more money as partners. But it means that who's going to take over the business in 10 years? You had no one that could, and this is true in the law. It's somewhat true in medicine, where you have to do that sort of apprenticeship-y kind of thing. If you use AI to replace all those apprentice level people when they're learning the business, what are you going to do in 5 years? Is the AI then going to be in the partner level and managing the business too? So it's potentially a little bit of seppuku, killing yourself to a certain extent for that model that has been in place for 100 and something years.
Yeah, it's like where's the on ramp? We've talked about this a few times. I think the example I gave, because I had some friends in the legal profession, but a similar kind of thing, which is, hey, if you're using e-discovery very well, the legal profession very well, if you're using all this technology to do the grunt work, the research, the thing that got people onboarded but also, to your point, educated and upskilled to the point where they could be a partner level attorney, and now you have AI doing that work, then what is that ramp? How do you continue to bring people in? And then for the workforce, how do you get people into that profession? I mean, the reality is this is displacing work. I mean, you can't argue with it. I think this oversimplified, will AI take jobs? Will AI not take jobs? Of course, the answer is really somewhere in the middle, but you can't argue with them going from a team of 14 to a team of 2 or 3, right? That's going to be, they're going to repurpose all those people. I don't think that they are, right? So maybe part of the answer is you don't need all of that on-ramping anymore. But at some point, you're going to have, to your point, right? You're going to have to put the next age of people in there. And how do you do that, right? Without those on-ramps.
And the other challenge is, I think there's wide acknowledgement that AI can replace the knowledge aspect of being a knowledge worker. But what it cannot replace, nor possibly replace, is the experience part of being a knowledge worker. What's the right thing to do in a given situation? And that's where this whole apprenticeship model comes from. It's not just that you know how to use a hammer to make a horseshoe. It's that how hard to hit the horseshoe as you're making it. What temperature is the right temperature for the horseshoe when you're forging it, and so forth.
But can't that be learned, Chris? Isn't that part of the thing where, like, okay, if we have these experts train the models now, then they'll be able to do that in 5 years, right?
Yes, but no. I mean, there's the tacit understanding of all of that, and then there's the implicit understanding of all of that. And I'm thoroughly convinced that at least LLMs, because it's generative AI is inherently context-less. That's just how transformers work. So it's like one of my colleagues uses the example, if you ever watch the movie A Beautiful Mind, where Russell Crowe plays that crazy mathematician, he can pretend to be that guy, but he can't be that guy. And that's AI, right? AI can pretend to be an expert. It can mimic having expertise. It can mimic having experience, but it doesn't have it. And so as long as that kind of superficiality is sufficient, you'll do okay. But as soon as play acting that experience is no longer works, then you're fried. You're toast at that point.
Gartner is bleeding. Others are, I'm sure, following. I didn't look up the stock prices of others. I mean, they're down like 51% over the last 6 months. And like I said before, the CEO defended it, saying the economy and all those things. And I'm sure a lot of those stats were true, but you gotta think that most people think this is part of it. Our mutual friend, my colleague Frank Casal, posted this week saying that the traditional firms are losing their relevance. As the old playbook doesn't need to be there anymore. And there's this displacement of the incumbents. I wonder though, Chris. I wonder at the end of the day, if you believe like I do that the answer is somewhere in the gray. It's not going to be like all this stuff is gone and black and white, and there's going to be some kind of new version hybrid thing. How important do you think brand is? I mean, at the end of the day, you could get your information from, consultant X plus AI or Gartner. Does that brand have any loyalty left? Does it have any credibility left? How relevant is the brand to all this?
This was the plausible deniability industrial complex. It really was, right? And I was there. I saw it. I sold the services to clients and worked with them. And it was I can do this because Gartner said so. That's what they were selling. So to your point, brand was the business. Brand was what people valued. And the question then becomes, is the gap between the value delivered by the brand and the price you pay worth it in a time when getting effectively the same advice that Gartner would produce is nearly free coming from AI? And I think that's the challenge that they're facing. When I was there, it was when COVID hit. And so all of our events, which was a significant portion of the revenue stream, the profitability, and the cachet of Gartner, was their events, and it all got nuked. And I don't think they've ever recovered from that, nor can they recover from that. The panache of going to a Gartner event and getting the VIP treatment and all that kind of stuff. You were in a club as an executive. You were part of the club, and you're happy to spend $500,000 of your company's money every year to be in that very exclusive club. It's just become the gap between the value provided and what you had to pay for it has simply gotten too large. And I don't know that they can recover. They will still have some relevance, but it's going to continue to diminish pretty quickly, I think.
So I spent a lot of time reading through this thread and a bunch of other threads over the last week, and I think if I can oversimplify a little bit, there seems to be kind of two schools of thought, right? One is I think what you were just kind of hitting on, like, hey, at the price point that AI has, I'll figure it out on my own with AI, and I don't need to spend that kind of money, right? The other school of thought is that AI will only be able to do the research part, and you're still going to need experts to interpret and provide real insights from the data. As we all know, data is not the same as insights, right? So, that you still need people that know how to, yes, the information is democratized, but you still need somebody to kind of, interpret it. You need someone to look at the PET scan and say, hey, this is what's wrong with you. But and also that, relationships and reputation still play a role in the decision-making process, at least for now.
I go back to stuff I wrote 10 years ago in my column that I used to have, where the more we automate away our humanness, the more the remaining fraction of humanness becomes more and more critical, right? So if you have to have brain surgery, do you want to go to the 10th best brain surgeon in the world, or are you going to pay a little bit more to get the first best? And that's really the effect that AI is going to have. If I need human contribution to my outcome, I'm going to have to pay through the nose to get the absolute best people. but I'm going to be willing to in that instance. Otherwise, it's all just commoditized and I throw it in the AI and hope for the best. So, that this polarization of how we view and how we value human talent was inevitable. Again, it's in my books for the last 12 years. I think it's just the reality of that is now upon us, which is why you see Meta trying to hire away OpenAI people and giving them $1 billion offer. I mean, think of the irony of a company that says our technology is going to replace all humans. And to succeed at that, they have to spend $1 billion to hire a couple of coders. I think the irony of that is completely lost on them. But
it's already there, right? And I agree with you, but it's already there. I saw this clip this week of what company was it? It was Boeing. It was a congressional hearing with Boeing, and they said to the CEO of Boeing, with all the issues and problems that they've had, they said, hey, you're making like a cool $23 million a year. And the people that are actually building this stuff haven't gotten a raise in whatever it was, X amount of years. He got like a 45% raise during maybe the worst time in Boeing's history. So there's already that disparity, right? Mm-hmm. I think what's happening here is more of that. And it brings up a bigger, more societal question that we won't get into on this show. But what do you do with those people, right? If you're not hiring people now because AI is doing that, grunt work and that research work, and you're paying just the top 5%, 10%, a lot of money to be the experts, but all that middle stuff isn't needed anymore, then what happens to the workforce, right? If you're the top 2 people on that 14-person team, great. But if you're the other 12 people, now what?
The economy at some point has to actually be productive rather than merely performative for us to have an economy. If I do a dance for you and you pay me $20 for dancing, and then you do the dance and I give you $20 back, we just produced $40 worth of GDP, but did we do anything productive? And we have become in the US a dramatically performative economy rather than a productive economy. And so that CEO is getting a performative salary, not a productive salary. It's unsustainable. And I think we see that all around us. At some point, we got to get back to building houses and laying roads and so forth, because all this performative stuff simply doesn't produce anything.
There's one comment on that McKinsey story that I thought was really interesting. And, somebody said that McKinsey itself shouldn't be terrified about the AI world, because they have data on thousands of successful initiatives. And it made me think of some of our clients, some of our members in the contact center space, for example, where they're saying, hey, listen, we're doing really interesting things in customer service because we have whatever it is, 1 billion customer service call data points every given year. Does that play a role, Chris? Like if you do have access to data that maybe that the Gen AI stuff isn't trained on, is that a thing, or is that a fallacy?
Yeah, I made those PowerPoints, and I gave those presentations. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt. What I've always advised anybody dealing with one of the consultancies or so forth is, if whatever they're talking about, if they say they have 3 successful case studies, ask for 2 more. If they say they have 6 successful case studies, ask for 2 more. Because they don't have 2 more. If they're giving you 3 or 4 successes, that's all they've got, almost invariably. So what's the right answer? The right answer is they might have lots of data. They do have lots of data, and hopefully they're learning from it. But to the earlier part of our conversation, if you don't have anybody to teach those lessons to, because you've gone to AI, all that organizational knowledge and wisdom is going to be lost. And you think you're going to capture it by sticking it in the AI, but the AI is only going to know what you did to be successful, not how you did it to be successful. And that's the most important part, I would argue.
Yeah. Well, I want to leave it on a positive note. And so one light at the end of the tunnel is, and I was asked this question on a podcast that I was a guest on yesterday, and, talking about AI kind of as a differentiator. And I think one of the things here is that, the flip side to that separation between the elite level and everybody else, if you're a business owner, if you have a boutique firm, consulting firm or analyst firm or what have you. Now you have democratized information to research and data and AI. And so it's kind of levels the playing field a little bit where, maybe Gartner will still exist, but not the same way that it did 10 years ago. And there's more room for, boutique niche specialist players out there that, can build a business and, chop a piece of market share away from the 800-pound gorilla, right?
I think that's absolutely what you're going to see, where that human element, that experience, doesn't belong to the firm; it belongs to the individual consultants. And the more we kind of force this haves and have-nots model, the more those individuals can walk, do their own boutique thing, and they walk with the expertise, the true expertise and wisdom with them, and they can deliver it for less. Not to name names, but Doug Laney, longtime colleague, brilliant, phenomenal Gartner analyst. He's now independent.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
And if you want big data expertise, do you go to Gartner or do you go to the man that invented the term at half the price? And so I was on a call with some attorneys that left one of the largest firms in the world, and they've started a boutique. They're cheaper than where they left, and they're the ones that actually carry the knowledge. So I think you're going to see a lot of this sort of fragmentation of expertise, and the firms that don't respond to that effectively are going to absolutely suffer for it. So,
yeah. Interesting times, Chris. Thank you, buddy. I know you've been busy. Lots of projects that we'll talk about on a future show that are in stealth mode. But appreciate your time. It's a huge topic. It's all over every conversation I'm having these days, and I don't think anybody knows the exact answer, but we're starting to see we've seen the writing on the wall. We're starting to see it happen, and it's just interesting times. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're back to weekly shows as we get to the end of the summer here. So we'll see you again Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. In the meantime, if there's anything you need help with, anything you're working on, we have a bunch of free resources and access to experts, networking, etc. Go to IRPAai.org for more information. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Thanks, Chris.
Invest in popcorn.